Hi guys, it's Phil
And Liam
from Die Hard on a Blank, and we're excited to talk to you about a brand new podcast we're launching called 48 Hours of Buddy Movies.
That's right, folks. 48-hour-long
approximately
episodes exploring 48 different buddy movies, beginning with the original classic that started it all, Walter Hill's 1982 masterpiece, 48 Hours, starring Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy.
And just like Die Hard on a Blank, our new show will explore the influence of 48 Hours on the action genre, one buddy movie at a time.
We'll be covering iconic franchises such as the Beverly Hills Cop movies, the Stakeout movies, the Bad Boys movies, classics of the genre like Running Scared,
Hyams Hive Rise Up,
Midnight Run, Red Heat, Tango and Cash, The Hard Way,
plus tough thrillers such as To Live and Die in LA, Black Rain, Point Break, Training Day, and The Way of the Gun.
as well as a few wild cards that you might not expect, such as RoboCop, Alien Nation, and, of course, Phil's favorite,
Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
So if you're a fan of two buddies talking buddy movies,
Then 48 Hours of Buddy Movies is for you.
visit patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe for the price of 1 cup of coffee a month.
See you in the squad car.
Or walking to the squad car, mildly irritated that we've been paired off.
Wherever. That's patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe.
Under Biden, Americans' cost of living skyrocketed. Food, housing, auto insurance. Lawsuit abuse is a big reason everything's more expensive today. Frivolous lawsuits cost working Americans over $4,000 a year in hidden taxes. President Trump understands the problem. That's why he supports loser pays legislation to stop lawsuit abuse and put thousands back in the pockets of hardworking Americans. It's time to make America affordable again. It's time to support the president's plan.
This podcast is brought to you by Aura. Imagine waking up to find your bank account drained, bills for loans you never took out, a warrant for your arrest, all because someone stole your identity. Hackers aren't waiting. Why are you? That's why we're thrilled to partner with Aura. Your personal data is a goldmine for hackers, and Aura helps lock it down. Aura monitors the dark web, blocks data brokers from selling your information, includes a VPN for private browsing, and a password manager to secure your accounts before criminals break in. For a limited time, Aura is offering our listeners a 14-day free trial plus a dark web scan to check if your personal information has been leaked, all for free at aura.com/safety. That's aura.com/safety to sign up and start protecting yourself and your loved ones. That's aura.com/safety. Terms apply. Check the site for details.
Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is Arlington Road.
It's Die Hard on a suburban street.
Now, we're very excited about to bring back our special guest for today.
Third time.
You know him, you love him, you can't live without him. Do you want to introduce our wonderful, beloved...
I thought you were just going to do it right then.
No, I have, you guys have a history.
Our special guest is one of our favorite guests, one of our favorite people around. He's a writer at New York Magazine, Vulture, frequent podcast guest, and just like one of our favorite people to talk to, Bilge Ebiri, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. Is it only the third time I'm doing this?
It is, but there's only one other person who's done 3.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that is Chris Tapley.
Oh, okay.
Who joined us for
very good company.
Yeah, Speed, Hard Rain, and Phil's favorite movie, Speed 2 Cruise Control. Phil's absolute. Yeah.
The one movie where I was unable to retain positive vibes, unfortunately, and the one movie I was unable to find anything positive to say about that film. But Bilge, we're so happy to have you. We're always thrilled to have you back. And also, I wanted to say a personal thank you for the terribly kind shout out you gave us in your recent review of The Cleaner. where you were kind enough to give us a little tip of the hat there. So that was very, very sweet of you.
I couldn't help but think of you guys all throughout the cleaner. I remember as I was watching it, I was like, I shouldn't even be doing a review. This should just be an episode of Die Hard on a Blank.
There have been a weird number of Die Hard on a Blanks lately. Like that Carry On Drop is kind of Die Hard on a First Date, that new one that just came out.
Yeah.
This G20 as well, feels like that's a Die Hard thing.
We are
right?
somehow so back. And yet, still, strangely,
not.
so over.
So not at the same time.
It's so back, yet so far away. To geek out very quickly, I have to ask you about your much-discussed recent interview with the man himself, Michael Mann, and a specific section of your conversation where he referred to Chicago as a very Brechtian city. And I'm wondering, is there anything on the cutting room floor from that? Because Bertolt Brecht wrote a play called In the Jungle of Cities, which is one of the greatest plays ever written, and it takes place in Chicago.
Oh, interesting. He did not mention that play.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there was other stuff. Yeah, he did not mention that. I don't know that play. I mean, I've read some Brecht, but not that one.
It's a very Michael Mann play. It's about a corrupt lumber merchant who goes into a bookstore one day and confronts the bookworm who works there and is like, I'm going to destroy your life in order to build you back up again. And it's like,
are you
very
fucking kidding me?
homoerotic.
That's awesome.
They're like in love with each other. Like it's one of his early plays, and it's kind of like changed my whole brain forever. So I was just like, when he said that, I was like, oh my God, Michael Mann has to have read Jungle of Cities. You should, it's fucking incredible.
I'll read
play.
it. I love that.
Yeah.
Is it? It's a Brecht play, obviously. Is it Brechtian? The play?
Yes. And it begins with literally the characters in the play turning to the audience and saying like, you're watching a wrestling match between two men in the great city of Chicago, like, but rather like focus your attention on the score, treat it like a boxing match. Like,
it is interesting that like the Brechtian, the intellectualized thing to do back in 1926 would have been to treat it like a match and just look at the score. Don't worry about the actual drama, which today would be like, that's maybe the dumbest thing you could say about something, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
That does lead us in an interesting way to this movie, which is kind of a tug of war, a wrestling match between these two, you know, Titanic actors and characters that represent two different views towards a government, I suppose, and towards the country. So, and I know, and speaking of the cities and connection to the cities, Lee and I were talking about how, you know, you're from DC, or you spent a lot of time there. This movie sort of takes place in and around the periphery of DC. So I'm really interested to know what's your background and history with this film? Like, do you remember when it first came out and what you were doing and what was going on for you and how you felt about it? Because it's a fascinating movie.
I do remember when it came out. I saw it. I'm trying to remember if I saw it in the theater or if I saw it, you know, on video not long after it came out. I remember the trailers, and the trailers were goofy as hell. I mean, I remember watching the trailers and going, "Wow, that looks really bad." And I don't know if you guys have seen the trailer for. I mean, I don't know how many trailers they had, but it is very sort of hyper. You know, lots of crazy close-ups of Jeff Bridges, and some of them, you know, like there's that one shot in the film, and I seem to recall it was in the trailer, where there's like, you know, Tim Robbins says something to him and they're talking, and it's kind of it's an intense moment. I don't remember what specifically Tim Robbins has just said, and you see Jeff Bridges kind of turn, and he's on the edge of the frame, so he just like has this like crazy expression on his face.
I know the bit you're talking about.
Right as he slips off frame, and it looks like a mistake. Like it looks like he was standing in the wrong spot and the light just hits his face a little too it's a little too harsh, and it has that very sort of exaggerated Jeff Bridges freak out face, and he just like slides out of frame, and it's like unintentional comedy. I remember that being in the trailer and going, oh my God, like what is going on? And you know,
it's the scene. That's the scene as I recall. I do remember seeing the trailer now. I believe that's the scene where Tim Robbins has kind of just confessed, and then he says, "Now we're having a party. You're very welcome to stay."
Yeah,
And I think it's that scene.
Yeah.
So it is. I mean, this whole film is a little
That's
bit on a
weird
knife,
scene.
knife edge, and I think I'm going to come out hot and heavy and immediately say I love this movie. I think it's absolutely awesome. But I can also see why, because it is so cranked up.
Yeah.
And that some people might consider it a bit maybe overwrought. So do you remember it when so you're a bit not sure about the trailer, but when you saw the final movie, what did you think?
That's another good question, because I don't remember what I thought of it the first time I saw it. I saw it, I saw it that back then. I mean, knowing the kind of cinephile I was, I probably looked down on it a little bit at the time. I revisited it years later when I did a big Jeff Bridges ranking for Rolling Stone some years ago. This would have been around the time of Hell or High Water, if I remember correctly.
He's amazing in Hell or High Water.
He is, and I did a profile of Jeff Bridges at the time. It wasn't a profile. It was supposed to be a profile. And I had done all this research. I'd watched everything, and I dug up all like movies from the 70s that weren't on video and stuff like that. And I was all ready for my interview. We'd scheduled it, and I was all ready to do it. It was like it was going to be the next day or something like that. And the publicist emailed me. I'll never forget this. Oh, no. And she was like, just to clarify, the interview's in Texas, right?
Oh no.
Nobody had told me. They were having their press day in Texas because the movie set, it was like kind of I don't remember if it was Dallas or what. And I was like, no, I can't go there. And so we never did the interview. And instead it became an essay on Jeff Bridges' career, which actually worked out really nicely. I'm very happy with the finished piece. It's one of the few things I wrote for the Village Voice that I was happy with at the time. So I remember revisiting Arlington Road then and having, I think, a bit more appreciation for it. And then I watched it again, just recently getting ready for this. At the time, it's funny. Watching it now, it feels like a time capsule. It didn't feel that way at the time. At the time, it was very hyper, but it actually, in some weird way, feels more hyper now because it has that sort of, it has that 90s action movie energy. It's not that much of an action movie, but it has that sort of heightened. The film I kept thinking of was Drop Zone as I was watching it, right? And I know you guys have done Drop Zone. I did the essay for Drop Zone, the recent 4K release for Vinegar Syndrome.
I have it in the other room.
If I had the air horn handy, I would be firing the air horn right now. We love Drop Zone. We're a Drop Zone pod.
And I love Drop Zone too. I loved it then. I love it still. For this essay, I had to watch it like 20 more times. And
I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you're doing okay.
I'm doing great. I'm doing actually better than I was before I watched Drop Zone. Honestly, I would highly recommend it. But like Drop Zone, because it's like an adrenaline junkie thriller, in the vein of Point Break and stuff. Yeah. It makes perfect sense to have it be like that. Arlington Road isn't an adrenaline junkie thriller, really, but it's kind of shot like that, which is fun. Like today, now I watch it, I'm like, this is totally ridiculous and crazy, and I'm having a blast. One thing I will say with Arlington Road, I have never been bored by the movie. Not like I don't remember entirely what I thought of it when I first saw it, but I remember like not being bored. And that's a testament to the actors, I think. I think the direction is interesting. Mark Pellington is a guy who I actually had the chance to meet a couple of years ago when his first film, Going All the Way, was that what it was called?
Yeah, Going All the Way, yeah.
His first film had a restoration and a kind of re-edit, like a director's cut re-release, and I did a Q&A with him. He's a really nice guy, really thoughtful, interesting guy who's had an interesting career. But, he came out of music videos and stuff like that, and so he brings some of that energy into this. Yeah. And it's funny because Going All the Way is a more stylized, very independent film, and this is kind of like a studio picture, but in its own way, this feels more stylized than the other one.
It's got that hyperkinetic editing style of the music video, so everything. Like I was rewatching that opening scene this morning with the which is an amazing opener, and there's so many cuts in it, and it goes on for quite some time, and when we've already established kind of what's going on, so the sort of cadence of it is quite specific to the era, and it makes complete sense that he came from the music video background because it's kind of like attention deficit disorder filmmaking style.
ADD cinema.
Well, I remember at the time, having been in, various film classes and stuff like that, there was a real, the thing people always used to say was, never show the same cut twice, right? Never like just cut back and forth on things, like always be moving. I mean, that actually goes against a lot of like classical Hollywood filmmaking style. And I don't think it was necessarily great advice. And I don't know that this movie actually adheres to that. To like there's plenty of standard cutting and stuff in the film as well. But there's one scene, like I was watching it the other night. I was this scene jumped out at me, and it's when he first meets his wife's old partner. The character name I forgot, but he meets him. They meet at the, I think it's a cemetery, right? Or somewhere around.
Yes.
Yes.
It's at the White. They both Whit, weird.
Isn't it?
What?
Is it Whit? Whit?
That
what
sounds
he calls
right.
him?
Yeah.
That's his nickname. Yeah.
And they're meeting, and it's like there's like a wide shot and then kind of a closer shot, and his wife's Whit, comes in the wide shot, and then we sort of, I don't remember the exact sequence of shots, but it's like 5 shots before we see Whit's face. And it's like it is such an odd set of cuts, and I feel like this is where that, like, the 90s dictum of like never showing the same thing twice gets you, because I'm like, you've inadvertently cut the scene as if this is going to be like some really dramatic character reveal, because we don't see this guy's face until you're halfway through the conversation. And it's just some guy, it's just an actor, But at the same time, that creates, I think, and this might have been intentional, it creates this real sort of unhinged feeling to the movie, right?
Yeah.
You never really know how much of what you're seeing is real and how much of like is just sort of being filtered through his paranoia and his grief. So it works. Like in the end, it kind of works. And I feel like that, that might have been intentional or not, but it does, you're just unhinged throughout the whole movie as the character is, and I think that's why it's never boring, because you're always kind of like, what the hell, what the fuck's gonna happen next?
It assaults you with its style, and it reminds me a little bit of what Tony Scott would go on to do with like Man on Fire, which I think is also a film that's filtered through the fractured psyche of the lead character. So it's like this hyperkinetic cutting style. It's very kind of disordered and jarring, and again, very assaulting in its like presentation. Yeah. So I think it's quite interesting that and this preceded Man on Fire by, I think, 5 years. So definitely the style is a major important factor of this film that does position it in the time in which it was made. Liam, was this relevant to you? Did you have a relationship with this one?
Yeah, so this is 99, right? So I was a dutiful employee of the video scene in Duxbury, Massachusetts, and took home the screener of this. I had no idea it existed until it came out on video. Like, somehow I missed previews, I missed trailers. Like, I have this distinct memory of being like, what is this? Like, why didn't I know about this movie? And I watched it, and I remember being like pretty disturbed by it, like kind of like, whoa. And then I hadn't seen it until last week when I went, it's just a weird story. I went to the library to pick up the DVD, and I walked into the used store that they have in the library, and they were selling the DVD of this for $1. So I was like, okay, I'll just this way I can like check out the special features and stuff. So I took it home, and I gotta say it didn't work for me almost at all. I think part of the reason is that I think it has to do with intent and the horror movie psycho element of that, but we can get into it later. But I do think that there are like, I think Pellington, as you pointed out, Bilge, he's a real smart guy and he's like a real intellectual. And there's an interview with him on the disc and with Aaron Kruger, who's a fascinating like late 90s screenwriter figure, like kind of talking about the intention of this movie. So yeah, I had the rewatch. I think there are some like absolutely standout performances in this movie. But we can talk about my mixed feelings about it. However, it is really interesting to watch every movie or all these movies through the lens of Die Hard, because this might be another one of these movies where I'm like, I wish Die Hard had a little less influence on this movie, like a little less influence. And the last thing I'll say to Bilge's point earlier is that the 90s are really the Jeff Bridges, like slow-mo running, terrified of like there's a real
more of it. I wish there was 10 more.
As a huge blown away apologist, you could call me. Like there's just so much of this like slow motion, desperate Bridges, and it's so funny how like it's so disparate with the like I don't know man mentality that guy had. Like he's such a hippie, but in the 90s he played these like high strung dudes. It's just so funny.
I want to say some of this, by the way, because especially because of like Bilge's expertise about you can literally contextualize his entire career. So we're going to do a whole section about Jeff Bridges and where this film fits in his career. So I don't want to sort of shoot too soon on that.
Don't blow your wad like the movie does.
I was trying not to say that word. Trying not to say that expression. I suddenly like.
It's all right. I'll say
hit
it.
The brakes.
I don't care.
I will just say before we move on, I saw this film when I was a film student, and it was on video. I think we would all kind of gather in like our collective, communal space and watch videos at that time. We were just on the cusp of the DVD revolution, and I remember we all loved it. And I still do. I've always really, really kind of connected with this film. I love these two actors. I think it's a fascinating subject. I love that it's just so outrageously bold, and it's such an uncompromising ending. That's pretty like difficult. And, to your point as well, this is kind of a hard film to categorize because it's not like, it's kind of like X. It's completely unique. There's almost nothing you could really compare it to. It's not a traditional action movie. It's kind of a thriller. It's kind of a 70s conspiracy paranoia film, but it's not. It's a drama, but it's not. It's kind of a horror film, but it's not, etc., etc. It's like this weird hybridization
Can I add one
of crazy
thing to that?
Stuff.
I don't think it's insignificant that Angela Badalamenti did the music for this movie because there's like a real
Lynchian
paperback
psychosis.
David Lynch quality to this film as well.
Yes, the Lynchian sort of perversion of traditional American suburban mores. Yeah. And he fits perfectly into that kind of conversation. But let's put some of this in context with the fast facts. This movie was directed by the aforementioned Mark Pellington, who I do think is a really interesting filmmaker, and I have thoughts on Mothman Prophecies
He's a new action movie coming out this year with Bryan Cranston.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I heard about that. Yeah.
Which I think is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Written by Aaron Kruger, stars Jeff Bridges, Tim Robbins, Joan Cusack, Hope Davis, and Robert Gossett. Distributed by Screen Gems through Sony. Release dates were interestingly slightly different. It was actually released ahead of the US in the UK. It was March 19th, 1999. Came out July 9th, 1999 in the USA. Budget 31 million and box office 41 million. So small profit, but probably not what they were hoping for. 30 million is not insignificant. But you got two big stars, and so it was sort of like a kind of a base hit-ish, but not setting the world on fire, I suppose. I think it probably did pretty well on video. But let's explain why we're talking about it on this show in a section that we like to call
Die Hard DNA.
Right. So I'm going to list my thoughts, and then I'll invite you gentlemen to chime in. I'm really
curious for this one, Phil. I saw one, but I'm curious what you got. But you always come up with a lot.
Yeah. Well, here's my main one is, if you think about it in these terms, isolated, underestimated, and perennially misunderstood everyman hero desperately tries to thwart a wily bad guy's sinister terror plot and becomes involved in a deadly cat and mouse game with a smart, cunning, manipulative adversary. Right? So there's an immediate parallel there in the sense of how back-footed the Jeff Bridges character, Michael Faraday, is. No one believes him. Everyone underestimates him. You know, there's a lot of that sort of stuff that just keeps him as that sort of underdog, everyman figure. The hero has a steady, loyal, even-handed, cool-headed Al Powell-esque friend, which is the wit character, who kind of gives him a bit of objectivity, although they're not really quite as even though they have more of a relationship than McClane and Al Powell, they're less chummy. Explores terrorism on US soil, somewhat critical of the FBI. And the other thing I thought as well was like one of the big ticket things was it was subterfuge and deception being integral to the whole experience, almost as if the Bill Clay scene was extended from Die Hard, was extended for an entire film.
Clay.
Indeed. Strong emphasis on suspense over action elements. Family member being used as a hostage. Holly, the son Grant, in this instance. Villains who use distraction and obfuscation to mask their true agenda. Villains using radio communication to initiate their plan. And both films end with a building exploding. So that would be my rollout for Die Hard DNA. Do you guys have any thoughts of your own or additions or to tag on to that before we move on?
I do not.
Okay.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, more than I would have found.
Yeah, you did a great. My only one was Wit, was the kind of like steadfast sidekick character. I do think that like in lieu of like necessarily like a very clear like Die Hard DNA, is that like these movies are all drenched in that like energy, but it's interesting to see how it evolves, because like Die Hard is like classically cut and edited compared to this movie, right? Like it's real. I mean, like this is the MTV generation thing that they always say. So it's very different, but it still feels like the action movie. Like there's a lot of like, let's fit every type of movie we can into the action movie genre, like Deep Blue Sea, which is the whiplash of going from Deep Blue Sea to Arlington Road on this podcast is like kind of nuts, but just like every movie has this like, but it's an action movie twist that we're covering here.
The analogy that I would make as well that's just sort of occurring to me is it's almost as if everybody's got the same recipe and a bunch of chefs decide, well, we're going to cook it in this way or add these spices or remove these elements or add these elements, but the basic recipe is the same. So it's one of the things that's been fascinating about doing this show is like seeing how different artists attack the same elements, because they're all there. The ingredients are the same: terrorism, cat and mouse, suspense, buildings exploding, all of that kind of stuff, but they're approached in totally different ways. Let's dive into all that in more detail when we come back with Anatomy of an Action Movie after this quick break.
6 months from now, you could be running a 5K, booking that dream trip, or seeing thicker, fuller hair every time you look in the mirror. Through Hers, you can get dermatologist-trusted, clinically proven prescriptions with ingredients that go beyond what over-the-counter products offer. Whether you prefer oral or topical treatments, Hers has you covered. Getting started is simple. Just fill out an intake form online, and a licensed provider will recommend a customized plan just for you. The best part? Everything is 100% online. If prescribed, your treatment ships right to your door. No pharmacy trips, no waiting rooms, and no insurance headaches. Plus, treatments start at just $35 a month. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/listen. That's FORHERS.com/listen. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information.
This podcast is brought to you by Aura. Imagine waking up to find your bank account drained, bills for loans you never took out, a warrant for your arrest, all because someone stole your identity. Hackers aren't waiting. Why are you? That's why we're thrilled to partner with Aura. Your personal data is a goldmine for hackers, and Aura helps lock it down. Aura monitors the dark web, blocks data brokers from selling your information, includes a VPN for private browsing, and a password manager to secure your accounts before criminals break in. For a limited time, Aura is offering our listeners a 14-day free trial plus a dark web scan to check if your personal information has been leaked, all for free at aura.com/safety. That's aura.com/safety to sign up and start protecting yourself and your loved ones. That's AURA.com/safety. Terms apply. Check the site for details.
And we're back with our next section of the show, Anatomy of an Action Movie, where we explore the tenets.
We live in a twilight world.
And there are no friends at dusk. Now, we know you're a tenet head. We know you're a tenet head. I should have allowed you to say that. I'm sorry.
One of the
I was too
great
excited.
soldiers of entropy here on the podcast this week. Because it's great because a lot of time people are like, pass. And we're like, okay.
We get a lot of tenet hate on this when we tee that up for people. But we know that you're in the club.
I have to ask, Bilge, what's the over-under that like halfway through the Odyssey, we find out it's actually a Tenet sequel? Just like it turns into, this is my dream. This is my dream that it ends up, the movie X ends up they're all in suits and there's helicopters. This is what I want from it.
Well, that they have gone back so far in time.
Yes.
That they're now in, it's like the Mel Brooks version of Tenet. Like they went too far.
Like,
yeah.
The protagonist, like the Trojan horse opens and it's the dudes from Stalks 12 at the end of it. Like that is my literal,
Sign me up.
I would like levitate. Like it just, that would be incredible.
Temporal pincer movement out the back of that horse.
It does.
Goosebumps.
I mean, it does.
Okay, so the first tenet of Anatomy of an Action Movie is the premise. I'm just going to tee this up, and then I want to get your thoughts, Bilge, about placing this in its historical context, and just let you cook on it. So the premise of this movie is as follows: after saving their son's life, widowed college professor and terrorism expert Michael Faraday, Jeff Bridges, gradually begins to suspect that his seemingly perfect new neighbors, Oliver and Cheryl Lang, played by Tim Robbins and Joan Cusack, are involved in a domestic terror plot. As he mounts a rogue investigation into their lives, Faraday's obsession with uncovering the truth spirals into paranoia, isolation, and a deadly battle of wills, one that threatens not only his life, but that of his young son, Grant, played by Spencer Treat Clark. Ticking clock, like Die Hard, the ticking clock emerges in the film's third act, as Faraday suspects that the villain's plan involves a massive terror strike on a building, something that he fights desperately to prevent. Okay, we've set the stage. Now, we've one of the reasons we were really excited to talk to you specifically about this film is that this concludes a kind of unofficial Pax Americana trilogy that you've discussed on this show. Starting with True Lies and then moving into The Rock and now this film, which is sort of at the end of the millennium. So would love to get your, macro and micro thoughts on, I guess, placing this film in its historical context, how you feel about it as part of that, spate of films in this period. Were it kind of, it obviously is very prescient today. Liam, am I missing anything in terms of teeing this up?
No, I think that was it. As part of it was like on both of our previous episodes, Pax Americana has come up. And my feeling is that this is kind of the end of it. And this movie represents that a little bit. But I'm curious to see what you think.
Well, represents it and foreshadows it too, right? Because the film is 1999. One thing you mentioned, kind of it's the odd release date difference between here in the UK. The film actually, its release was held because Columbine happened right around the time it was supposed to come out, and they decided to hold it. The Columbine, got to qualify because not everyone knows the Columbine high school massacre, where two students went on a rampage and shot up the place, and so it's held back a little bit, but which is a thing that eventually happens to a lot of movies because the shootings pile up.
Right.
But I remember while watching it just this most recently, I'd sort of forgotten when it had come out, and there were some, they do use images and shots of previous incidents and things like that. And at one point I was like, oh, there's September 11th. And then later on, as I was watching, wait, what? I think this movie came out before September 11th. Like, what is that? And I think that it might have been, the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City. But the general idea, I mean, Pax Americana is such a, nebulous concept, which, I've taken that term that someone else used for something else to kind of use it to describe something more general. But Pax Americana basically ends with September 11th, right? And there is that, and it kind of refers, in my mind, at least, to this period when, after the fall of the Soviet Union and before September 11th and all that came after, when there is this sense of, stability and security in the U.S., though not really. But, in terms of films, it's an interesting period because we're like looking for villains, right? And that's what happens in a movie like The Rock, where you're kind of like, I mean, we're never the underdog, right? The U.S. in this period is just never the underdog, but it's always like, little terrorist cells or little, outliers or, disgruntled vets. And, it's always these little groups that are going to kind of undermine us, which turns out, with Al-Qaeda and everything that happened afterwards, I mean, there was some truth to that, but there is this sense of, but like during this period, it's not a period of actual stability and safety. Like nobody actually felt totally safe. We just didn't feel like we were going to be obliterated by Soviet missiles, right? But there was definitely the sense that, there's homegrown terrorism and stuff like that. And, politically, it was a very turbulent time too. But the thing that's interesting to me about this movie is, we had some stories about, like, films about, white supremacists and stuff like that. Like Costa Gavras is Betrayed, was in the 80s. This one is very much, and I think the Lynch, the Lynch influences feed into this. This one is very much, you think that like the people you need to worry about are like off in the woods somewhere, either in, the mountains of Michigan or, the deserts of Afghanistan or whatever, but really it's your next door neighbor. It's in that sense, it actually has a very 50s quality to it. Like even more than I do want to talk about the 70s paranoid thriller a little bit, but there is actually, it has more of a kind of 50s, like what are those neighbors up to quality, right?
Twilight Zone almost.
Twilight Zone. And Pellington has said that like Blue Velvet was like a huge influence on him, when he first saw it, before he became a filmmaker, I guess. So obviously that's partly in the DNA. And I read an interview where he said like the main movie he watched and showed people before he did this was Rosemary's Baby, which is also a good example. And in fact, the film I think owes more to the Rosemary's Babies of the world than to like the Parallax Views of the world. And that's another thing. Like I'm watching it this past time because I was thinking to myself, like, oh, there's a part of me that's like, oh, what this movie really needs is like an Alan J. Pakula type director, right? Like there's all this,
yes,
methodical searching in archives and finding people's names and making these connections and stuff like that, and and even the sort of the dark ending, like that all actually feels very Parallax View on some level, right? But then I thought to myself, I mean, if Alan J. Pakula tried to make a movie like this, he would have to have it completely rewritten, or he would just not do it because the story is actually ridiculous, entertainingly ridiculous, and also like the twist and where it all ends up makes no sense because the whole idea is, I mean, at least this is kind of what we're led to believe is, Tim Robbins and his wife are like being moved around to places to kind of finagle neighbors or whoever into to sort of work on these people and sort of frame
set them up as pawns and patsies
and lone gunmen.
Right. So then which begs the question, like, okay, so like did they like blow off their son's hand to sort of get Jeff Bridges involved in their life, like because the way the story develops, and this is like a good screenwriting trick is, the way the story develops, you're not really thinking, oh, he's going to get framed for this, because it's like it's very organic. He very organically enters their life through this thing, which couldn't have been a setup. Is it a setup? I don't know, right? And obviously, and he does take the kid to the doctor, and the doctors are not like, well, there's nothing wrong with this kid's hand. Somebody's pulling one over on you. This is, red corn syrup or whatever. It's like, no, like the kid's genuinely injured. So, but like that's just one thing. I mean, there's like if you actually sat down and spent time with this script and like stared at it, it would start to dissolve in terms of logic.
Unravel.
But that's actually why it actually makes sense to shoot it the way Pellington did, which is just like this hyper, I'm not going to stop. Jeff Bridges is just going to run from one scene to the other. I am not going to slow down so you can think about the plot. We're on the roller coaster and we're just going. And I think that's why it actually works. Like it's, as ridiculous as it is, you're having fun watching it.
It reminds me what you're just saying as well, and it's starting to crystallize a bit more and more in my mind now that we talk about his directorial approach and the Lynch influence, because I think his intention here is to create the feeling of a nightmare.
Yeah.
A nightmare that feels like when a nightmare crests at its most distressing point, that's almost like this movie extended to 100 minutes or whatever it is. It's all at that like point of like very intense fear, and therefore it isn't totally logical. You're right in that obviously the plot held to really, really stark scrutiny doesn't really make sense. But that's why it's like, the Alan J. Pakula version there would be an inherent disparity, wouldn't it? Because it's like he's someone that's rigorous to verisimilitude and logic and accuracy for the most part of the films he's made. And this film doesn't really, the material wouldn't withstand a director like that. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, Pakula would also, I think the thing, this is the thing with Parallax View is, you can't really, like, Parallax View in its own way doesn't quite make sense, but he shoots it in such a way, he shoots it in such an elliptical way that it is actually, that film is also kind of like a dream, right? But, but it's built on, kind of this growing sense of paranoia as opposed to the quality of a nightmare, which is what Arlington Road has. I was just talking on another podcast about Out of Sight, the Steven Soderbergh movie, right? Which, classic, we all love it.
Awesome movie.
And the thing about Out of Sight is
it's amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's a masterpiece. Absolutely. That also doesn't make any fucking sense, right? No. And I remember that was like a thing that people, would say about that story. It's like, well, I thought that absolutely does not make sense. Like, why would she fall for him? Like, why would that happen? Of course, and then you have to remind yourself, well, he is George Clooney, and he actually looks like George Clooney. And this is the rare movie, because Soderbergh does that type of thing, where like, act like characters are allowed to be acknowledged as like ridiculously hot, or Julia Roberts plays a character and everybody's like, well, it looks like Julia Roberts, like he plays with that sort of thing. And he is, the kind of director who would be aware that, well, this guy is played by George Clooney, and in the movie he looks like that. And so, someone might fall for him. Sorry, I'm digressing, but the thing that I wanted to say was, in Out of Sight, they sell the script and the direction sell the character's attachment by first introducing it as a dream sequence, right? And you're kind of like, well, what's happening? Like, there's a scene where he's sitting in a tub, and she comes in, right, and it looks like she's going to come in and arrest him or whatever, and instead, she falls into the tub. And then she wakes up. It turns out
it's a sexual fantasy.
It's a sexual fantasy.
But the whole movie is creamy like that in logic. Like it has this like creamy blues and style.
And the whole film is shot in that style. But like that's the one scene, if I remember correctly, in the movie that is an actual dream sequence. Mm-hmm. But
you're right.
By introducing that early on, it kind of inoculates us for the later scene when something like that does happen, when he drifts back into her life and they actually have the great Gary and Celeste scene, which is also shot like a dream, but within the narrative of the movie, it actually happened. But, Arlington Road does something similar in that because it's there's so many scenes, and there are a couple of scenes that are sort of like dream sequences, but so many scenes in the film I'm watching. Oh, this must be a dream sequence, right? No. Oh, wait, no, this is real. And it inoculates us in that way, not by giving us like an early dream sequence, but by kind of being like, you know, I know you think this scene doesn't make sense. Wait till you see. Wait till the next scene. That's really not going to make sense. And then wait till the end, and it actually just carries you along on its, I would say, ridiculousness. Like that becomes actually its great virtue, even though at first you might be like, what is going on? You know, so that by the end you're just totally bought into how crazy it all is.
So ultimately, do you like? I'm still a little unsure whether you like the movie or not, or is it two spaces that coexist for you?
It's. Do I? I mean, I do. I enjoy it. Like I would watch it again. You know, that's the thing. It's always hard with certain films. You know, it's like Megalopolis. Do I like Megalopolis? Well, I kind of love Megalopolis, but you know, Megalopolis is like full of all sorts of shit that doesn't really work, but it kind of works in the context of Megalopolis. You know, this is obviously not like that, but like there are a lot of films where you're just kind of like, you know, like my mind says no, but my body says yes. You know, yes, kind of like,
I understand.
Like this makes no like.
Yeah, I get that.
And as a critic, this is a thing I often have to reckon with, which I'm like, this is. Comedies are like that, right? A lot of my favorite comedies are kind of like, listen, this is, I mean, objectively, if I have to sit here and write 800 words about this movie, I have to point out that this doesn't work, this is offensive, this is stupid, and yet I laughed my ass off, so I love it, you know, like.
That's sort of how I feel about Tango and Cash that I just rewatched, where I'm like, this film makes zero sense. Everything that happens is ludicrous, and I love every frame of this movie.
And this is actually a thing, and this is also, I think, why, you know, one of the many reasons why I love your podcast, because this is kind of the 90s action movie in a nutshell, right? It is the sort of, and I remember this is because at the time also, you know, like I remember, and I wasn't really a critic during this period. I kind of became a critic right at the tail end of this, but I was, you know, thinking of movies critically. And I remember these movies would come out with, you know, that looks so stupid. It's just another retread of this, and oh god, all right, well, which Friday opening night showing shall we go to? You know, like, and then you go, oh my god, that was so stupid. That scene where he does this, that's so dumb, and this guy was so bad, and what the hell was that scene about? And then like, you know, 6 months.
Should we go again tomorrow?
No, 6 months later, hey, I rented it on Laserdisc. You want to come over and watch it? You know, you know, and it's like, okay, now I'm gonna dub it onto VHS so I have a copy in case I need to watch it again.
Oh my god!
And now it's like, oh yeah, like fuck yeah, you know, Daylight. Hell yeah, let's watch Daylight. You know,
Jesus movie, the great Jesus movie.
I mean, Daylight is a movie that at the time looked like the dumbest piece of shit ever, and you know, buying it on Blu-ray a couple of years ago was like one of the best purchases I made.
4K is coming out later this year from Kino Lorber.
That must be why the Blu-ray was so cheap.
Well, these films are so, especially from this era, even a film that maybe doesn't make sense or has taste issues or whatever, generally speaking, the craft is so exceptionally high and they look great that they're almost always rewatchable, or that you can pull something out of them unless it's Speed 2 Cruise Control.
And they have people like, that's the other thing. I mean, they have people like Jeff Bridges and Tim Robbins in them,
right?
Which and they're doing like actual parts, right? Now it's
doing amazing work,
right? And, I mean, the biggest problem with, Speed 2 has many problems. Among the biggest problems with Speed 2 is that it's Sandra Bullock and Jason Patric, and they have zero chemistry. You know, when you got a Jeff Bridges or a Tim Robbins for a movie like this, like you got a Jeff Bridges and a Tim Robbins, like they weren't showing up for a day and phoning it in and going home. This was like, this was their movie. Like this, they're
fully committed.
Yeah, Jeff Bridges is like doing research and like going to, you know, meet with professors and stuff like that and preparing himself for the part. And, you know, so it's, like, and, you know, I mean, you see it on like the little making ofs. They're there. They're bought in on these movies, and I think that's a big thing about these films from this period. It's like you're getting like real actors giving real performances and making it work. You know,
and not only that, like in the 20-minute little making of on the disc, Aaron Kruger talks about how they would do improvs and he would rewrite the script. Yeah. So it's like there's real process going on here. And like to kind of treat, it's glib to put it this simply, but like this is like a 1999 action movie that they kind of went Mike Lee on in terms of like, let's see what the actors bring to this part. And like Hope Davis comes on and she's like, when I got the script, like my character was kind of like, they didn't really know what to do with her. And so we had lots of meetings and lots of conversations. And like Hope Davis is great in this movie, but this is like, a 25-minute part in the movie, right? It's like,
she's great. And Hope Davis is a really great actress. I mean, she is like one of the best actresses of her generation. And
Day Trippers fanatic over here. She's amazing. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Liam, do you want to, we disagree about this film, so I'm going to suggest we do the following thing. Why don't you say what your opinions are? We'll do a little prosecution and defense, and maybe Bilge can be the judge here, a judge and jury, judge, jury, and executioner, a la Judge Dredd. Give your opinion, and I'm going to defend this film to the hilt vigorously.
I think that this conversation is clarifying because you guys are pointing out that this movie leans maybe more towards a psychodrama or a subjective look through Jeff Bridges' psyche as a grieving and possibly like a little bit disturbed figure who like gets completely caught up in a plot by like, it reminds me a little bit of a movie that comes out a year before this called Enemy of the State, which rocks. But the tagline for that movie is, it's not paranoia if they're really out to get you. And I kind of wish that that was the tagline for this movie, considering the movie that it is. Here's the thing, and I don't want to take too much time with this. I think I'm looking for this to be a different movie than the one that it actually is. And what I'll say is that, like, especially in the 20-something years since this movie has come out, I mean, like, the simple, unfortunate reality is that like this extremism is to some extent winning the war right now, at least in terms of like, there's a lot of like anti-government in the government mentality right now that's going on for real. However, and that is why, to me, and maybe this is only in retrospect, I wanted a slightly more serious take and maybe a more nuanced drama than the one that I got, which is not like isn't really necessarily a critique of the movie, but like there's something buried in this movie that Aaron Kruger, who's on the DVD, very smart, interesting guy, fascinating career, but he says part of what this film is about is how politics affect you and how you talk about it. And I would say that no, that's not what this movie is about. And it has a scene where it's close to that, right? Where like they're all around the table and there's that really great Altman-esque crosstalk thing that's going on. Like, I love that moment because it's like, you've got Tim Robbins talking to Hope Davis, and you get this little backstory. He's like, oh, my dad was killed in a farming accident, right? And like, you get a little bit of that. And then the camera, like, even the dialogue transitions over, and Joan Cusack, who like fucking rocks in this movie.
Amazing.
She's so good in this movie. Is kind of like talking about values. And it's like, it's one of those scenes that like, it's really, to me, one of the standout moments in the movie, because there's kind of a movie here that's about like, don't question your neighbor on their politics. But it's like, oh, actually, no, we should have been questioning our neighbors on their politics a long time ago. And so I think what I'm looking for is a more nuanced drama. And the reason this movie, and I'll say that I think that there's one big problem with the movie is that, so Bilge, to your point earlier about the boy's hand, right? There's a really poignant scene later in the movie when Spencer Treat Clark is hitting baseballs and the kid is just sitting there.
Oh, yeah.
And he's depressed. And the reason that he's depressed is I'm 100% convinced his psycho dad was like, we have to blow your hand off to save America. Like, he is like in on the, like, or at least like this happens to him and his dad, like 100%. That's the moments of the movie that like really speak to me, the unanswered questions of this movie. Is this a setup? Who are these people? That kind of like low grade resonance is really powerful, because ultimately the most powerful thing this movie is about is like, you can't really ever know your neighbors. And we live in a society built on, to some extent, the lie of like a functioning society that exists among us, right? Like as people. And so the way that the movie plays with this is really, really fascinating to me. And I would say that the Lynchian elements, the opening credits, the digital jerky, Lost Highway video kind of aggressive opening make you be very clear from the beginning, these people are terrorists. And I wish the movie held that. I wish that it actually was a bit of a, how do I say, like a bit of an actual mystery. It's very one note to me that it's like, and they're bad guys. And like, I understand that, but I also think that like, if you're saying things like my movie is about how politics affect you and how you talk about it, then like make that kind of a little part of it. Pellington also says, you know, the bad guys aren't these beer swilling rednecks that go out hunting every weekend. Like thinking those are the people who you can't trust will get us all into trouble. And it's like, that's there in the movie, but it needs like a little more nuance than it ultimately has. And so to me, the psychodrama kind of approach of this movie, despite being really entertaining, like no question, and being disturbing the first time you watch this movie, especially as like, you know, the ambience as a kid who turned 9 or 8 in 1990, the ambience of what was going on in this country is now very strong to me. I remember being on vacation and my parents watching the footage about Waco, Texas. Of course, I remember Oklahoma City. Like all of this stuff was kind of there, but I, as a kid, was like, oh, it didn't really like come into relief for me until like the late 90s with Bill Clinton's impeachment, like, and kind of what was actually going on in the country. And so the way that this like makes manifest this really, in some ways, terrifying decade that the 1990s were, is really, really interesting. And it kind of like brings to the surface this like this terrifying thing that was going on. But I just think the movie doesn't have the nuance to make a larger point about who we are. And I almost think, I don't know what the solution is, because I know it's very clear that Pellington is passionate about this subject and Kruger's very passionate about this subject. But by turning it into a psychodrama horror movie, despite some of those scenes really working, the party scene in this movie is like Pakula paranoia, like heaven. Yeah. It's amazing. But it doesn't ultimately work because I don't take it seriously. And that's really what it comes down to, is I'm unable to take this movie's point of view seriously because it's ridiculous and because it has no mystery.
All right.
The prosecution rests.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm but a simple movie podcaster.
All right.
Nice.
So my esteemed colleague here has very articulately explained his position, and all completely everything you said is absolutely fair. All I can say genuinely is this film 100% works for me.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I watched it, it's rare that you watch a film, especially nowadays, where it's like scene one, I'm going to grab you by the fucking throat and you are not leaving until this movie is over. And that's what that scene did for me with it's so transgressive. You're seeing this poor child. You know, it's like every parent's nightmare or every empathetic person's nightmare is to see a child in that level of distress. And you've got this very relatable character who you haven't met, but the first thing he does as Jeff Bridges, just normal dad driving around in his SUV, driving around the suburban neighborhood, also very relatable iconography. But then in the middle of it is this absolute nightmare image, of this distressed child who's suffering a horrific bloody injury. It's so shocking and visceral. And then to see, so you're immediately, I think, as an audience, drawn into the avatar of the Jeff Bridges character as your every man, every person, surrogate. So you feel like that's what you would like to believe you would do in that situation. And he's fucking dynamic and courageous. He doesn't wait around for a night. He doesn't call 911 or fluster. He's like, oh my God, take off the tie, make it a tourniquet, get him in the car. His white shirt's covered in blood, great imagery. And the music is like pounding and that terror of getting this child to the hospital. And then it begins with the whole thing where he's so in the zone, Bridges. It's unbelievable acting. And he's been harassed by the doctor who's going, what's his name? What's his name? And he goes, I don't know his name. And it's like, boom, the movie's begun. And I'm like, fuck yeah, I am so in. Inject it into my veins. This is fucking amazing. And then, right, that's just for starters. That's just your starter for 10. And then it just builds and builds and builds, and for the cat and mouse and some of the scene. I mean, I love. We'll get to this in a second, but Jeff Bridges at level 10 stress is movie heaven for me. I mean, he's just so amazing at it. And the kineticism of the whole movie and the you know, this sort of dance of death between these two incredible actors, you know, at like a peak moment in both of their careers. I mean, they've always been exceptional, and they've maintained like peak level for their entire career. But this was like them both mid-career, going at it. You know, these two fascinating, like, they both come across as really smart.
It's great
as well,
casting,
right? It's brilliant casting. We'll talk about that when we get to those two. But for me, you know, the whole movie, I absolutely loved it. It grabbed me immediately, and then, but that ending was just so like I mean, I felt as kind of dazed as the Bridges character when that reveal, you know, came out that he essentially had been. Is the one that was going to cause this to happen, which reminds me of an interesting speech that Jim Caviezel's character does in DHOAB, where he talks about like causality and how if you try and diffuse a bomb, you cause the bomb to go off. And he has this very interesting philosophical monologue about it. So for me, I just remember being like, the balls of that ending.
Totally.
You know, was, I mean,
Shades of the Mist.
The Mist. And the 90s did take the word like transgressive dark endings. You think of like Usual Suspects or Seven, for example, films that were like really quite, you know, bold in like, we're going to make you feel like shit at the end of this movie. But because you can simultaneously appreciate the craft of the storytelling and the brilliance of the filmmaking, you know, for me, it was just like, what an incredible experience that was, and what a bold, brave, and you know, amazing approach to this material, which I appreciate may not work for everyone, but I have no issue with it whatsoever. And the other thing, that now looking back at it and saying this is the inception point, these were the seeds, the germs of like a kind of collective mistrust, of hatred towards government and extremism, that over time has those seeds have now become, you know, beanstalks that are gigantic and stretch all the way to the, you know, inside the White House. So for me, it's like this did bottle, you know, something very powerful that was bubbling under the surface in America. And now the new fear in America, I think the new terror, the new horror in America is having a conversation with your neighbor about politics and discovering that you are on different ideological lines of something that is so inflammatory and so personal that, you know, this is, so to me, it's like, it was so, not only is it a brilliant film in its own right, but it was so prescient to what we're kind of all having to wrestle with now, which is, what does my neighbor feel about politics? The defense rest. Where do you come down? What's the judge? What's the judge's ruling?
No, I will say that I think you're right about everything, and I think that like this really is like a matter of taste. I will say that there's a great book that came out this year called "When the Clock Broke" by John Gans, which is. Who's a host with Jamel Bowie, one of my favorite podcasts, and I cannot wait until they cover this movie because they're going to, unclear in Present Danger. But the book is about the seeds of extremism in the 90s and essentially begins with David Duke running for Senate in Louisiana. And it takes this sort of like mosaic approach to what happened in that era, and it deals with the LAPD, and it deals with Rodney King, and it's like a huge picture into this, and it's absolutely an incredible book and totally worth reading. And I do think that like this movie deserves credit for, to some extent, being ahead of the curve. This is one of the few movies where I'm like, this might have worked as like a mini series to me.
Yeah, they were going to do. There's been talk of a television adaptation. As of yet, it's not happened. But a few years ago, there was an announcement in the trades, and it makes sense. I mean, this could be a great limited series. You know, it's two really juicy parts.
Can I propose an interesting version of this movie? Considering, you know what movie Aaron Kruger wrote almost immediately after this movie? Reindeer Games.
Yeah.
And so, which I don't...
John Frankenheimer's best film.
But I wonder what a Frankenheimer version of this movie would be, considering it's kind of a Manchurian candidate in the late 20th century, right? Like, so I just think that would there's like a lot of different interesting versions of this, and I don't fault this movie for what it does. It just like doesn't work for, it's like a total personal taste thing.
All right. Well, let's get into the.
Thank you for humoring. Yeah. Thank you for humoring us, Bilge.
I think it gets off. The hero of this movie. I want to move into this section, and I want to get Bilge's thoughts about this, because you're a Jeff Bridges expert, literally a Jeff Bridges scholar. You know, you've done all of this research about his entire career. Jeff Bridges as Michael Faraday. What interests you the most about this performance in the wider context of his incredible filmography, and what are your just general thoughts on this Bridges in this role?
Well, my theory about Jeff Bridges is that he is the ultimate avatar of the boomer, right? Yeah. And it's kind of you watch him in his early movies. I mean, starts acting in late 60s. I mean, he starts acting as a child, but late 60s, early 70s. The trajectory of his characters, when you sort of look at the long swath of his career, actually in some weird way mirrors sort of what we think of as the trajectory of the average boomer. And part of this is because in many ways, he didn't quite have, in the 70s, he didn't quite have that sort of that dark, sinister edge that a lot of actors at that time did, right? The coiled anger of a De Niro, or sort of the flamboyance of Pacino, or Jack Nicholson, or Dustin Hoffman, or even Gene Hackman. He winds up being the everyman because no one else can be the everyman in the 70s. Like everyone else is like really brooding and intense. And Jeff Bridges is like the like kind of like a hippie, though not quite a hippie. Like he wouldn't it's kind of like he's kind of a go along to get along. He's very placid. He's very passive in movies. Stuff happens to him. I mean, that's the thing. That's why, in some weird way, even though The Big Lebowski is such a notable and unique part, his career has been building up to that, because he's kind of the only actor from that period who could pull a part like that off. Even though I think they originally wanted like Mel Gibson for the part or something like that. So in many ways, he's kind of like, he's perfect for this part, because he's sort of, he kind of represents so much of the psychological baggage of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s at this point. Even though the character doesn't need, like, the character doesn't express any of that, but like you see it with Jeff Bridges, like it actually, like Jeff Bridges exudes that aura, for me at least.
Totally.
And so he's actually perfect. I mean, as I understand, with Arlington Road, they initially went to Tim Robbins and said, you can play either one of these guys. And Tim Robbins was like, I want to play the villain, and also, like, I think I'll have less to do as the villain. So he gets it, and then they go and find Jeff Bridges for the other part. But it's like, it actually makes more sense for Jeff Bridges to have been the first person to be cast. But Jeff Bridges, it also really works for me. The two performances really work because Tim Robbins is like the antithesis of Jeff Bridges, right? Tim Robbins is, I mean, he's playing that here as well, but Tim Robbins is a very composed actor. He's always been a very composed actor, which is why later, when he starts to do like these kind of weird unhinged parts, and like he wins Oscars and stuff for those, but they actually do kind of stand out. Like, that's not, you don't think of that as the Tim Robbins persona.
Did he win for Mystic River?
He won for Mystic River, yeah. And he was also in War of the Worlds, which is kind of a weird little scene. It's a great movie.
That movie. Talk about a 9/11 movie. Good Lord.
Yeah. So I mean, like, that's my theory of Jeff Bridges, and it actually really works well here, because Jeff Bridges, like, he does feel like a guy you might wind up living next to, Yeah. And you'd be really happy to be living next to him. And of course, he's the protagonist, so it's really, he winds up living next to Tim Robbins, but he does actually feel like a person you would see. And that's kind of also Jeff Bridges' whole vibe. Like, he's an incredibly good looking dude, right? I mean, he's an absolute hunk in the 70s and 80s, but he's not like perfectly preserved in that way. Like, he's not like trying to kind of maintain that because he's never really thought of himself as a star. He's always been like the idea of acting as craft, the idea of acting as work was really drilled into him relatively early in his career, because he actually tried to leave acting like after Last Picture Show and stuff. There was a period where he was like he didn't want to do it because it was like this family profession. He'd sort of fallen into it.
Mm-hmm.
He felt like it was like weirdly too easy, and he wasn't having fun doing it. And he does this production of The Iceman Cometh, directed by John Frankenheimer, and I can't remember what it was called, like American Film Theater, I think it was called. It was basically they staged these productions for film, right? So it's like it's not a fully cinematically opened up version. It's a very faithful version of the play, but it's like shot for film and it opened in theaters and stuff. And he's doing this with like, Robert Ryan is there, the number of like huge actors, and he notices that they're all like incredibly nervous, and he's like, what's going on here? And like these guys teach him, like acting is work. Don't like be feel be grateful that you've been able to do this, but actually what makes acting fun and what makes acting challenging is the work. And after that, he really sort of starts to put in the work, even though he is sort of a very natural presence on screen, and there's this kind of very easygoing quality to him. Like he's a guy who has always thought of it as work, and it's funny because his thing has always been, I don't really vary my, I don't really like to do the same character twice. Like he doesn't want to be pigeonholed and stuff like that. But it's like every Jeff Bridges part is Jeff Bridges, like in some weird way, he is more of an indelible on-screen persona than anyone else, in part because he's tried to vary it so much. Like occasionally when he plays a villain, it's like a total disaster. Like in The Vanishing, it's just that's the one thing that he can't quite do. But where was I going with? No, so that's sort of why I think Jeff Bridges works really well here, and why also, when going back to sort of your little debate just now over the relative merits of this film. I mean, I think in some ways you're both right. There is, especially now, you watch a movie like this, or you look at material like this, and you're like, I want a serious version of this. Like, and I don't think, like, that's the thing. I think, this is Aaron Kruger's first script. He wins an award for it. He's like, basically, I don't know if he's a kid at this point, but he's young.
He's very young. He's very. You look at him. He's like baby.
Yeah, and he's he's had his name. I don't know. I never trust the credit on a Hollywood movie, the screenwriting credit on a Hollywood movie, because by the time these things are done, especially back then, I don't know what it's like now, but
he'd be 27 when this movie came out.
Yeah, but back then, a studio film, 30 people have like given it polishes and script. Like there are people out there who have zero credits and yet make thousands of dollars every year polishing and punching up scripts and things like that. So which is all to say, I can't judge Aaron Kruger as a screenwriter. He's been writing for a long time. He's got credits on some amazing movies, but Arlington Road to me does feel like he thinks he wrote a very serious movie. But I think like Mark Pellington wisely at some point was like, this is like, I think Mark Pellington, it's not that he doesn't take this material seriously, but he's just like, there's only really one way that this script is going to work. And that's going to be sort of this like crazy way I'm going to shoot it.
Fever dream.
Yeah. Fever dream.
Totally.
And so like there is that, I think there is a bit of tension in just sort of the inception of the movie. So like, but like when I'm watching, like I remember like just recently watching the film again, watching Jeff Bridges giving his lectures, right? His classes when he's doing it, right? And usually when I see someone giving a lecture in a class, or a character who's like a professor, it's very somber, it's very thoughtful, it's very symbolic, because it's like these are the scenes that are going to inform the rest of the movie. And he goes off the rails pretty quickly.
Immediately. It's how long are we gonna? It's like, whoa, these are like 18-year-old college students. Like, chill out.
But I'm watching it, and it's like so relatable, because this is totally what I would be like if I had to teach this class. So there is that,
but it's not like he's teaching something that happened 200 years ago. He's teaching something that like stirs the blood. And it's immediate, right?
But it also adds to that quality of the fever dream, right? Because it does feel like, I mean, look, he did a ton of preparation for this, and you do get the sense that he knows what he's talking about, but he goes off the rails so quickly that there is this quality of, it's like you're in a nightmare, or you're an anxiety dream, and your anxiety dream is like you are suddenly teaching a class on terrorism, right? Like, like that's kind of how the movie feels, right? It's almost like a role-playing game. Like you're like, okay, now you're teaching a class on terrorism. What are you going to say? And it's like,
and he is an unreliable narrator, even though in the end he ends up being a reliable one. Like the movie plays with that a little bit, and you're like, he's a little unhinged from the very beginning of the movie.
And I think there are some elements where I think the movie plays with it a little too much, and that comes into sort of the hybrid genre element of it, because there's the Lynchian stuff, which is, the thing is, Lynch is like one of the most influential filmmakers of all time, and yet at the same time, he's really like the only guy who could kind of pull it off. Like his sensibility is so important to what he does. I feel the same way about Terrence Malick. I mean, there are a lot of Malick influenced films I do like, but like the specific thing Terrence Malick does really only ever works when he does it because it's filtered through his sensibility, and his sensibility is unique. And I it's not that I don't think David Lynch movies are political, because I do think they are like deeply political, but they're not like, you would never see, well, I almost said you would never see an FBI agent in a David Lynch movie, which is like categorically not, like literally not true. But like, he doesn't like, that's almost like too concrete. It's too on the ground for David Lynch. Like he's much more ethereal his approach. So it's like his David Lynch's movies resonate because of like how he deals with relationships and darkness and all of these elements. And it's almost like you would never see him like, it's almost like his movies that exist. Like Blue Velvet, it might as well be a 1950s movie, right? Like it has that real Americana, but with that like gross kind of, thing at its core. He really plays with that stuff. It's like they're out of time, whereas this is very concretely 1999 or 98 or whatever year it happens to take place. The thing I wanted to say was there is this sense, and this you get this a lot in first films and also early films of directors. There is this like sense of like he wants to bring in everything he knows. He wants to bring in every genre he knows, and that can sometimes lead to cacophony. I think actually for the most part it works here, but there are like certain points where the film does things that like horror movies do, but it's not really a horror movie. I mean, it is kind of a horror movie, but it's not really a horror movie. So like, for example, this is the one part where I was like, this feels like a mistake with the whole thing with Hope Davis, right? When she follows that truck, and then she calls from the payphone, and Joan Cusack, who by the way is fantastic, is right there. There's so many scenes.
It's a jump scare.
There's so many
best shot in the movie.
There's so many scenes in this movie, shots in the, but it's like they're right behind me, aren't they? Like it's literally like this could be he's right behind me, isn't he? The motion picture, like literally every other scene, which of course adds to the fever dream quality, but. Hope Davis is calling. Joan Cusack shows up, and there's this like, I was just shopping. Yeah, I was shopping. It's like long, holds on her face, and then it cuts to Jeff Bridges, discovering on the news that
coming home from work and turning on the TV,
and it's kind of like this film works a lot better if it's really always only from Jeff Bridges' perspective.
Right.
And that scene is like, it's such a cheat, like it's a perspective cheat there. And it's like, it's a perspective cheat, and then it's like, well, he just cuts away and she's dead. I'm like, wait. Joan Cusack killed Hope Davis? I kind of need to see that. Like, how did this happen? How did they pull this off? And obviously it's conspiracy thriller. You don't need to see that. But because we've suddenly been put in Hope Davis's perspective for this extended sequence, then it feels like one cheat and then it's another cheat. Like, right?
Because it's subjective. It's no longer subjective, and therefore the sort of the major filmmaking approach to the material is no longer consistent.
Yeah, and
which is to make it like a subjective fever dream from one person inside one person.
Yeah, and I think that I think that really, the subjectivity really enhances the film. And at this point, of course, you know, we cut to Hope Davis, and then it's like kind of almost confirmation for us that this is in fact what's going on, and that these people are in fact, you know, are up to something. So then to not see what they did, but then to just find out that she's you know, that she's died in this car accident, then it makes you think, am I supposed to now suddenly think this is vague again? Like, what's going on? Or am I supposed to suddenly think, am I supposed to suddenly be uncertain?
Is it paranoia or not?
It's like paranoia is justified at this point, well justified. Now, admittedly, you know, it's not long before we get the party scene, which is wonderful, and that's kind of where it's like, it's all right. Well, stop worrying about all the other shit that like we're doing this, people, you know. Right. So yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to note that.
There, very good. I know we want to move on, but like, there's little things in this movie that like drive me a little nuts in that regard. Like when he shows up at their house to like use the phone, and it's like the children of the corn. All of a sudden, the girls are like, "Hello," and you're like, "What the fuck?" Like, these are just like 2 scenes ago. These were just like normal little girls. Or like, this is such a small thing, but it drove me nuts. Tim Robbins just like drinking milk. I was like, only psycho adult men drink milk. It's just like these weird little bits of like, they want you to know, but they also want you to be off center about it, right? And like, it just feels very like tonally kind of all over the place in that sense. And it's such a serious subject. I don't want to like, you know, be like a finger wagger about the tone of this movie, but that sometimes those choices diminish the seriousness of what the movie is actually trying to say, in my opinion.
You know, what you said, Bilge, your point about Bridges is really fascinating, and completely tracks about the idea that he is essentially the ultimate kind of a boomer icon or a boomer avatar throughout his career. And it's because he's had such a long career that we've got to see all the different stages of the kind of boomer trajectory through him. But I think what's really interesting about this film as well, similarly moving into the villain section, is that not just Tim Robbins, but Joan Cusack as kind of like icons of the go-go 80s and subvert, because they were both, you know, they're both like, you know, I think of John Cusack a lot as well, of being, you know, tape heads, or, you know, it's Joan is his sister. Yeah. They were in those, you know, they're so associated with a fun, you know, the fun movies of the 80s, that to cast them as the villains, I think was such a inspired choice. So I really want to get your thoughts on, we'll start with Tim Robbins, you know, the decision to cast him in quite an unusual part for him, how he fares. And then I have to tell a Tim Robbins anecdote in this section, but I want to get your thoughts on him first as the villain of this piece, Oliver Lang / William Fenimore.
I mean, I think he's great. I mean, I mentioned it a little bit before, but I think it makes a really nice contrast with Jeff Bridges. There's also, you know, Tim Robbins, to me at least, and especially at this point, you know, he's also becoming more of a director. Which, by the way, you know, at this point he's done Dead Man Walking.
It's
also about a white supremacist, you know.
I forgot about that.
He, so, you know, he has. I mean, it's funny because when he says, "Oh, I'm just a structural engineer," it's like, no, you're not. You're not. It's like he actually feels more like he could be a professor. Like, you know, he has more of that academic quality. But like that actually really helps, because it's like this kind of, is he just a total normie, or is he actually know a lot more than he's letting on? And that, I think, works really well for the twist reveal, the ultimate, he's actually the guy behind the scenes manipulating everything. All that works. And, having Joan Cusack be his wife and be sort of this kind of very normie mom type. Like Joan Cusack is
Stepford wife, kind of.
Yeah, which is funny. That's so, against type for her. Right? Yeah. She's like kooky, Joan Cusack. Like, this is not like the type of role that she tended to play, but she's very good at it.
Working Girl feels like her most probably iconic role. I think she got an Oscar nomination for that.
Yeah.
The kooky, weird sort of sidekick character.
Yeah. And putting her in that role is great, because she's doing great. Like, she's playing very straight, but it's like, we can never forget that it's Joan Cusack, and it's kind of like, something's not right about this. Something's not right.
It's also worth noting that 2 years before she gets an Oscar nomination for In and Out with Kevin Kline, which is like kind of slight, like, she's having a big moment in the late 90s. And In and Out is this like slightly more like middle of the road normie character who's in love with this guy who, ends up coming out of the closet. So it's like, I remember a very clear memory of in the late 90s of like Joan Cusack has it. She's having this huge moment in her career, right? So it's interesting that she plays this, like, she's only in this movie for like 20 minutes. But she's like ambiently so like Rosemary's Baby,
so effective,
so Rosemary's Baby in this performance, and this kind of like, she's the neighbor, like it's really she really like hones in on that uncanny strangeness that seems to be in this movie, and Robbins brilliant. Is a little more middle of the road in a very intentional way.
Well, I'll tell you, because we are we're in the thick of it. So let me tell you my Tim Robbins sort of take, and then I'll tell you this funny story I've been trying to get off my chest. So, I mean, I think he's brilliant in this. I think it's kind of genius casting, because in some ways he's like he's so likable and baby-faced. And we've, as an audience, I think he's probably, although he's got this incredible body of work, most closely associated for a mainstream audience, I would say, with The Shawshank Redemption, in which he comes as such a moral, virtuous, decent person, right? So to completely twist that around and have him play, not to say he hasn't played, the player or whatever, he's played sort of scummy characters or whatever, or Bob Roberts, right? But even in Bob Roberts, the whole point, he's still so charming, even though the character is so monstrous, right? So it's just, I think it's such a genius and out left field piece of casting. So I think he's absolutely fantastic in this. All right, so let me tell you this. So I'll tell the story because I sort of have an apology to make to Tim Robbins that I've been dying to clean up now for 11 years. So in the vain hope that perhaps with, someone of Bilge's character and caliber on this show, that this, by some osmosis, this apology will get back to him. I'm gonna offer this up because I've never had a chance to actually do this. So basically,
his son moved across the street from me in my old neighborhood in Brooklyn. I had like a couple of interactions with him, but I've since moved out of there. But
well, maybe.
Wait a minute, are you Tim Robbins to his Jeff Bridges in Arlington Road? You're like, time to move to Connecticut.
I totally missed my chance to make that joke to that guy. You've moved across the street from America's foremost Jeff Bridges scholar.
The sequel. There's a sequal there. Yeah. All right. So, I guess
Arlington Roads. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Am I ever going to get this story out? So it's 2013. I've moved to LA, right? And I have this naive idea that I'm like, well, I'm gonna be like a triple threat in film, TV, and theater, right? And blah 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 blah. And you kind of realize this, you need to specialize out here. But I'm coming from London. I'm a playwright, so I'm kind of basically getting the lay of the land of the theater scene in Los Angeles, right? And I go to a production of Heart of Darkness, one of my all-time favorite books, and it's a one-man show of it at Tim Robbins Theatre, the Actors Gang, which is in Culver City here in LA. He's not involved with this production, but he's the artistic director of this theatre, and essentially it's his thing. And after this, the show's amazing. He's not in it, or he's not directing it, but afterwards, everyone's spilling outside of the theatre. And I'm saying to the friend who I'm with, we want to get some sushi? And we're just basically talking out loud. Like, I wonder if there's a good sushi spot around here. This voice goes, actually, there's a really good one just across the street. It's yada, yada. And I look, and this giant steps out of the shadows, which is Tim Robbins himself, right? Just very casually giving me a sushi restaurant recommendation. So I was sort of like, oh, okay, this is happening. So, we start having a conversation. Long story short, this leads to a scenario where I go back to, I see another play there that he is involved with, Midsummer Night's Dream. And I think, and he's very accessible. He's playing the drums as part of the musicians in it and stuff. And he's just there mingling. And so I sort of get to, I'm hanging out with him a little bit over this period. And he's really great and cool and accessible and just funny and, telling stories. And it's just like his, I'm not, there's no fanboying or anything. It's just very chill, right? Anyway, this leads to a scenario whereby I have this idea of I'm going to put on these one-act plays that I had done in London and everything. And because I'd met a guy at the theatre who was super nice and welcoming. And he said, well, why don't you do it here? I said, this is something I'm thinking about. He said, well, why don't you do it here? We like you. So I was like, all right, wow, great. This will be really cool because it'll give me some cred, right? It's Tim Robbins Theatre. So now the story takes a slight twist. So we're putting the kind of team together to do this. And there's a chap, I'm just going to call him, we'll just use this code name. We'll call him T. Now, he's the designer of the show. And he's a brilliant designer. And he was awesome on this project. And he worked on it for free. And he was great. And he's super talented. On the other hand, he's also a kind of rough and tumble Boston guy that has zero fucks to give and doesn't really care too much about sacred cows or whatnot. Is is sort of a punk rock kind of dude, right? He's a great guy, but he's also a little he's a little like that. So we're doing our get-in kind of thing at the Actors Gang for the show.
You're loading in.
Or we'd gone for to scout it out and work out what we were going to do. Basically, we're going into the theater, and he brings his dog, right? T, as we're calling him in quotes, brings his dog with him. And I was confounded. We sit outside, but I'm like, okay. The co-artistic, he asked permission to the co-artistic director. Is it all right if we go in? Is it all right if the dog goes in? But I was thinking it's not all right if the dog goes in. Don't even ask the question. Let me stop you there. But it was already kind of I could feel this situation slipping away from me. Right? She's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Go in. Right? We go in. The play that is currently on at his theatre involves two women in a kitchen making food. So there is food everywhere. Right, as part of the setup of what the current show that is in place. This, and I'm like, this is my nightmare, a la Arlington Road. I'm now in this fever dream nightmare, right? That this dog is running around in the theater, and I'm like 2 steps behind to stopping this from happening because I'm like, I'm sorry, but with the best will in the world and the best dog in the world, none of this is okay. We are guests in this situation. This is not cool. And anyway, it's out of my control. I'm walking up the stairs looking at the stage and a voice comes out of the shadows that says, I don't want the dog in the house. And it's Tim Robbins himself. And to quote Stanley Tucci in Kiss of Death, your balls shrivel to the size of chickpeas, right? This is the most physically mortifying scenario for me, where it just makes me look like the most disrespectful, in someone else's house. People could say a lot of things about me that might be fair criticism, but I would like to think that being inconsiderate or disrespectful or rude in someone else's house, essentially, would not be one of the criticisms that would be leveled at me, especially as a desperately polite English person, that I would aspire to be. So it was like the nightmare scenario for me that was like, he had to be there at that moment. And then it looks like it's me who's allowed all of this to happen. So in the vain attempt that you are, somehow by some cultural osmosis, this gets back to you. Mr. Robbins, I'm so sorry that happened. Not that the dog didn't disturb anything or do anything, but regardless, that's not the point. It never should have been there. And I'm genuinely sorry, and I would never have disrespected your theatre. The show did go on and everything, and it all worked out. But he's probably never thought twice about that. But I've been mortified about it for 11 years, so I need to just get it off my chest.
And in an Arlington-style twist, the gentleman known as T was my neighbor growing up.
Oh, okay.
And I knew him by a different name. We'll call it D. We'll just leave it there. But I will tell you that not giving a fuck is very consistent with this guy's vibe from literally riding the bus with me in first grade. And Phil and I did not know this.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Until somehow it's crazy.
That's not how you guys met. Okay.
No, we didn't meet through that annoying gentleman.
It was just the craziest coincidence, because Liam and I didn't even know each other before we started doing the show.
Oh.
So the fact that we had this crazy kind of connection in our past through a mutual friend was bizarre.
That's a great story.
So, anyway,
that's a great story.
No, I've got to get that off my chest.
Tim, it's T's fault. Trust me.
But it's funny because it is also one of those things where, like, it's it's a moment where you feel like the spotlight is on you for all the wrong reasons, but also totally uncharacteristic of the kind of person you are.
Exactly. Well, let's get things back on track. We've talked, we've covered. We talked about Joan Cusack as Cheryl, amazing performance, brilliant casting. We've talked a little bit about Hope Davis as the lady of this piece. Is there anything we want to add about her performance as Brooke before we move on? I mean, I agree. She's amazing. I mentioned in a previous episode I saw her in God of Carnage on stage. With it was Jeff Daniels and James Gandolfini. It was an amazing production in New York, and she's fantastic. So yeah, great performance. Anything to add about her before we move on?
Only to me that she makes you sort of think that Bridges is a little kooky.
Yeah,
and that's
impressive. She plays it very well. Yeah, because she starts to sort of be like, when the scene where she's like, no, hang on, Michael, you brought that up, and she kind of offers that, but
it's sad when she goes too.
Yeah. She's really great.
It is.
Yeah, she's really great.
That's another reason why that scene kind of really jumps out as a cheat. I'm like, you just killed Hope Davis. Like, this is a bigger moment than a mere cutaway.
Totally.
Like that happens to a nosy neighbor or somebody's dog. That's what happens to that.
Right.
This is like
not
a main character. Like you're killing off a major character, and we've just entered her perspective. Like, you can't just cut away and just be like, well, look, there's our car,
Dark.
Well, the last sort of tenet to discuss, really, because we're going to skip the humor section. It's not really a laugh riot, this one. Although there is some sort of macabre humor, but how this film fares as an action level, and thinking because we've talked about how it's sort of a hybrid of a multitude of things, of horror, thriller, drama, 70s paranoia, all of that stuff. But as an action, this is podcast primarily about action. The limited action that does exist, which is the race to the hospital at the beginning, the botched FBI raid, and the race and the final sequence. How do you just feel about it? It's as an action, on an action level. Is there a favorite bit or a moment that you guys liked or found interesting?
Well, it's weird because it has, like I said before, it does have the pace and kind of the freewheeling energy of a testosterone action movie, but it doesn't have like those sequences, right? I mean, it has the heightened performances and the fast editing and kind of the jagged camera work, but not really. There aren't the script doesn't have many action sequences per se. It does at the end, right? So it really builds up the action, and and of course, the ending is the least action movie thing about it, because the thing about action movies is they tend to have moderately happy endings, and this is just
Right.
like, all right, we're gonna really like, we're gonna have the car
guys
chase,
win.
and this is and there's this pulse pounding, and this is like he's running, and then first he sees the thing, and there's nobody there. Oh my god, he realizes, and then he's running, and then boom, the FBI building blows up. They're all dead. You know, it's like, ooh,
So bleak.
Yeah, like,
It's kind of interesting as well that this is the second film that we've covered that involves an almost identical strike on an FBI building with a car bomb after the siege, which we also talked about, which, you know, had a similar sequence that also sort of cut just before the actual explosion.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting thing to me about this as an action movie is that it's a somewhat action picture set in DC. And that feels really distinct, because like True Lies does that too, but it's like much glossier, right? And so even just the scenes where like he's walking around, you see the brutalist architecture and the sort of buildings in the background and all this stuff, I think is like really, really intriguing. And I what I miss about the 90s is, what I miss about movie culture now is that like every movie takes place in the blandest city imaginable, right? And so the fact that like the character of you know, the civil servant law enforcement thing of DC is very present in this movie. Like it does feel specific to DC, which to me, Bilge, you can speak to this more probably, feels unlike anywhere else in the country. It's a very distinct place.
yes, I agree. Although I would say, you know, there are some really great action movies set in DC. So this one doesn't like this. It's no In the Line of Fire, right? Like,
Oh my God! Of course, yeah. Well, I mean, what is in the line of fire? You know that.
And In the Line of Fire, famously, much of it's shot in Philadelphia. And I don't even know where some of this. I mean, there's a couple of scenes obviously shot in DC, but there's so much because, you know, I mean, I grew up in DC, but I grew up in the DC suburbs, so I'm familiar with the area. Like there's so many scenes in this movie where I'm like, well, I don't think they shot this anywhere near DC. Like aside from the actual scene in DC with like the Capitol in the background and stuff, I'm like there's so much more you could do with a DC setting. But you know, it is
interesting.
It's more of a very sort of generic, almost a kind of Midwestern suburbia to
Texas.
They shot in Texas.
They shot most of this film in Houston, Texas.
Right, because it's got very broad streets, and DC suburbs, I mean, they're very suburban, but they don't have really broad streets because it's an older place, you know. So you don't have as much, like it does, like the kid running down the street at the beginning. It almost feels like, you know, the opening shots in Badlands, you know, like where Sissy Spacek and Martin Sheen are walking down the street. Like it feels like one of those scenes because the street is wide.
They use the University of Houston for George Washington.
Yeah, because the other thing is George Washington University is like in the middle of DC. Like it's right next to like the Kennedy Center and the Watergate Hotel.
Man, my theory just went out the window.
Well, no, but like once there is enough of it. But I do think that's like there is atmosphere in the film, but it's suburban atmosphere. That's
right. You're right. Well, that's part of what it's about, right?
Sure, yeah. So it's fine. But like, it is funny because I was just at George Washington University last week, and I was like, well, that doesn't. It's like, is there another part of campus that I missed?
Interesting.
But that's okay. You know, that's fine.
Well, let's put on our tuxedos and we'll move from the suburbs into the glitz and glamour of the Die Hard Oscars.
Of the Dolby Theater.
AKA the Action Movie Awards, to hand out some Oscars. So, you know the deal by now. The first award is the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line. I've got 3 nominees, but please feel free to add if there was one that, you know, caught your ear. This was a really chilling one from Oliver Lang, the Tim Robbins character, where he says, Michael, because of you, my son is alive. I would very much like to return the favor.
That's a really good line. That's a really good one.
Chilling. There's another bit in that around the same exchange where Bridges says, what are you doing? How many people are you going to kill? And Robbins responds, well, if I see any strange cars on my street, if you feel compelled to talk to someone, a federal agent perhaps, I imagine we're just going to kill one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really good.
Robbins is really good.
I mean,
in this,
great writes. I think there's some great writing in this. And then the last one that I always remembered, especially because of what the sound design does at the end when the FBI agent Whit Carver says, "Everyone is supposed to be here, everyone except you," and it's like goosebumps, man. Like that ending, I loved it. I love this. I know you're kind of critiquing it, but I love it.
Wondering if you like this movie. Yeah, I think it's got to be
those are my noms.
One.
What do you
first
think,
one,
guys?
The kid, the one about the sun. That's powerful.
Scary, huh? Oof, chilling. All right, this is a good category. The Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film. Joan Cusack as Cheryl Lang / Fenimore, Hope Davis as Brooke Wolfe, Robert Gossett as FBI agent Whit Carver, Mason Gamble. Remember he was Dennis the Menace? Remember that? As Brady Lang / Fenimore. He had a hand though
in that role.
That's dark. Dark. And Spencer Treat Clark as Grant Faraday. Two excellent performances from the young actors, the child actors. So, as our guest, Bilge, would you like to go first?
It's got to be Joan Cusack. I mean, it's got to be Joan Cusack. And it's, she takes what on page was probably a thankless role and turns it into something really special.
Totally.
Yeah. Would you agree, Liam? Or
I would, but I want a minute to talk about Spencer Treat Clark, if I may, because this kid has a hell of a late 90s into the early 2000s.
That's the thing. He's very
I don't want to slow your roll, but I'm running out of trivia questions already, and I think you're going to head.
Okay.
Would you mind if we pull back on that? Sorry,
no. I'll talk about it then.
Yeah,
that's totally fine.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just
But I think ultimately it's Joan Cusack. But I do love Spencer Treat Clark.
Great. Finally, because we're not going to do best death because it's too grim.
No more table.
No more table. I'm sorry. Let's cap it off with the Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie. My nominees are the gung-ho FBI assault team who raid the camp in the flashback. Those guys are like, yeehaw! They're so excited to kill these people.
Well, that's not thank God that's not what it's like in reality. Anyways, keep going.
The terrorists especially shout out for the creepy scoutmaster. Remember him? Plus one of those guys kind of looked like Moby. I thought so. Both of those two were at a pretty high creep factor. It was kind of tough, actually, for Dick of the Movie. Those were the only ones I can think of. Would you have a pick or an additional nominee?
Bilge?
Dick of the Movie goes for me to that woman at the end when they're interviewing his former students, right? And she's just like, well, but also like, isn't she part of the conspiracy?
She is. She's one of the terrorists. Right. So it's part of the media manipulation campaign.
Yeah, so she's Dick of the Movie. The thing is, the
shout.
thing I couldn't remember though was like I could tell I was right that she's one of the terrorists, but was she also in his class? Because
you never see her in class because I went back and rewound it.
Because I was going to say,
would be clever if she was.
Is that part of the is that how they found him? Like, is that part of the I was like that. I thought, maybe I should rewind and check and see because I wonder if actually the inception of this plot was her being in that class and staking out this guy and being like, okay, this is
maybe you're right. Maybe I missed
either way,
her.
She's the Dick of the movie for me.
That's a great shout.
I'm gonna bounce on that, which is the bro-ish student who's like, this guy was talking about terrorists all the time. That's literally his job. You little shithead. Like, what? But I do think the media manipulation campaign at the end of this movie is one of the most brilliant elements of it.
Very clever. Yeah. All right. Well, let's take one last break and then wrap things up with the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz, where the scores can really change. We'll be right back.
6 months from now, you could be running a 5K, booking that dream trip, or seeing thicker, fuller hair every time you look in the mirror. Through Hers, you can get dermatologist-trusted, clinically proven prescriptions with ingredients that go beyond what over-the-counter products offer. Whether you prefer oral or topical treatments, Hers has you covered. Getting started is simple. Just fill out an intake form online, and a licensed provider will recommend a customized plan just for you. The best part? Everything is 100% online. If prescribed, your treatment ships right to your door. No pharmacy trips, no waiting rooms, and no insurance headaches. Plus, treatments start at just $35 a month. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/listen. That's FORHERS.com/listen. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information.
This podcast is brought to you by Aura. By the time you hear about a data breach, your information has already been exposed for months. On average, companies take 277 days to report a breach. That's 9 months where hackers have access to your personal data. That's why we're thrilled to partner with Aura. Aura is an all-in-one digital safety solution that monitors the dark web for your phone number, email, and social security number, sending real-time alerts if your info is found. It also includes a VPN, password manager, and data broker removal to help keep you safe. For a limited time, Aura is offering a 14-day free trial plus a dark web scan to check if your personal information has been leaked, all for free at aura.com/safety. That's aura.com/safety to sign up and protect your loved ones. That's AURA.com/safety. Terms apply. Check the site for details.
And we're back with our final section of the show, Double Jeopardy. Okay, you guys know the rules. Collaboration is encouraged. And 3 quiz questions. You get a clue each one. Question number 1. Child actor Spencer Treat Clark would go on to play Bruce Willis's son in which dark and moody film from the year 2000?
Unbreakable.
Yeah.
Sorry, Unbreakable.
Yeah, Unbreakable.
No, this is what you were going to say earlier, right? So you had a little piece you wanted to say about
he loses his dad
Spencer.
in 1999, and in 2000 he has a broken relationship with his dad, who ends up being a superhero, and his real father is killed a few years before in a Roman Colosseum. So it's just there's a lot of tragedy for this young man, and
Yeah.
I think he's a wonderful actor.
I agree.
And I understand why, but I was a little sad that he did not return in Gladiator 2.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
that's true.
He does. Is he still? He's still acting, I assume, right?
He is. He's still acting. He does a lot of stuff, but I just really think that this little boy has the most beautiful sad eyes, and the fact that he does these 3 roles, sort of back to back. It's just a really, really strong actor.
Heavy lifting as an actor as well, right? He's not just there to be cute.
And
it's
the point of this whole podcast,
really intense.
He does so much for Bruce Willis. One of the best performances Bruce Willis ever gave is the scene in Unbreakable when he slides the paper across to the boy when it's he's the superhero and they just nod at each other, and Spencer Treat Clark's eyes well up because his dad is a hero. It's I think, to me, one of the pinnacles of Bruce being able to really act, and it's one of the few moments where he does it. Bruce is a great face actor, and it's just a very powerful moment. So big kudos to Spencer Treat Clark.
It is interesting. I mean, you do wonder, could he have had... he and Haley Joel Osment must have been going for the same parts.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean,
probably.
obviously Haley Joel Osment is Sixth Sense, and then he does Unbreakable, and Shyamalan is very good with those young actors, and he brings them back for Glass, which is nice. But
I haven't seen Glass. I gotta watch
he comes
Glass.
back for Glass.
Cool.
I don't remember what I thought of his. I remember his character in Glass, obviously playing the son again, but I don't remember what I thought of his performance in Glass. But it is interesting. You're could he have had the kind of career that Haley Joel Osment had? He is very memorable, and it's funny because you're just you see him and you're just oh wait, it's the kid from Unbreakable,
right?
Because that's such an indelible performance. Yeah, and Gladiator, and I guess he was in Mystic River.
Yeah, he is in Mystic
As the
River.
mute
Yeah,
kid.
totally. He's the. Oh my God. Yeah, what a tough life.
What a
this
filmography
kid's
as well, though.
Yeah,
You know, it's really
wonderful
impressive.
actor.
Question number 2. This might be a little tougher. Bruce Willis made an uncredited cameo playing himself in which 1992 movie starring Tim Robbins in the leading role?
I know this one.
Go ahead.
Dude, go for it.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I have no idea.
You don't?
Uh-uh.
I have mentioned this movie on the podcast.
Well,
podcast.
then look at me. I feel like a dumb. Is it? Oh, it's the player. It's the player. It's the player. Yeah.
It's
Okay,
The Player.
that's a great
movie I
thing.
haven't revisited, but loved so much as a kid. I had it on video and watched it all the time, even though it's quite adult, really. And it's probably a bit close to home watching that film. That where a writer gets murdered by a studio executive.
It has,
Spoiler alert for the player.
It has enough very ironically placed Die Hard elements that you could probably do an episode on the player.
Oh wow!
You know?
Challenge.
You did that
Challenge
for
extended.
Hamlet, and I was like, we got to do Hamlet, which we ended up doing because it's really hard to track down that Branagh Hamlet. But anyway, amazing. Okay.
All right, our final question. It's back by popular demand. Convoluted Corner.
Gonna.
All right, here we go. Question number 3. Prolific character actor Stanley Anderson appears in Arlington Road as Dr. Archer Scobie, the troubled father of the man blamed for the St. Louis bombing in the film. Anderson is well known to listeners of this podcast for playing the president in both The Rock and Armageddon.
Oh.
But Anderson also appeared in which Bruce Willis comedic fantasy movie made for Disney and released in the year 2000? Yeah, you thought I was going to give you a layup, but I didn't. It would have been too easy. Any ideas?
I have an idea.
I know what it is.
You do? Is it?
Yeah, but I accidentally cheated in this category, to be totally honest.
Is it the film known as Disney's The Kid?
It is.
Yeah.
So I was going to do this as a bonus question if you didn't do it because Bilge was on for The Rock. So weirdly, this is the second time Bilge's been on a movie
this is
with
a Stanley Anderson podcast.
Just as a quick note, he's in Seinfeld. He plays a judge on Seinfeld, Vandelay, which is I think where Costanza gets the name for the Art Vandelay. Maybe not. But then he's in Shadow Conspiracy, which is a terrible movie, but kind of a 1998. It's just hilarious. He's in so many.
RoboCop 3?
He's in RoboCop 3. He's in The Pelican Brief. He's in Canadian Bacon. He's in City Hall. He's just one of those actors. He's in Spider-Man, who just kind of did a lot of stuff. So very good
Pelican
actor.
Brief, interesting companion piece to this. And you
Yeah.
know, Pakula, Conspiracy, Paranoia. I've been trying to find it. It's been hard to find. And by the way, this film is kind of hard to find, but it is on. We'll post a link.
Come to my house.
It's
I
on
have the DVD. I might give
It's
it
on
to you.
YouTube. It's on YouTube in its entirety. It is a little bit hard to find at the moment.
Yeah.
Usually we don't say that, but if it's not available and that's the only way people can see it, then I feel like duty bound.
This feels like there's going to be a Vinegar Syndrome arrow.
Let's hope so.
59.95. Special booklet with 5 different essays.
That you write an essay for?
Yeah, probably. I'll probably have to write an essay for it. It feels like one of those movies. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah,
Well,
it's just waiting for a rebirth.
Yeah.
Of Vinegar Syndrome essays,
Yeah,
I feel like we need to highlight your
Drop Zone.
recent work on Drop Zone. This is one of the most beautiful Blu-rays I've ever bought. The
Such a great
layout and
cover.
design of it. Yeah,
The cover is
it's
fantastic.
the cover's fantastic. It's Tony Stella who did the Akira Kurosawa art, but it's anyway, for people buying, we're not an advertisement, but we did just have Justin on. The booklet is connected to the discs. It's so great. It's like a beautiful collector's edition, and your essay is wonderful.
Thanks.
And anyone standing for Drop Zone, I mean,
Drop
You're in the right
Zone
place.
you're our
rocks.
guy.
Drop Zone rocks. I really,
It really
really
does.
I saw that movie opening weekend and I was just like, oh, this is it. That I'm totally. Why is this not a huge hit?
It's so crazy that all of a sudden all the drop zone heads we're all like, we feel safe to come into the light.
Well, Phil meanwhile, Phil and Bilge are sitting there with their watches on, like, you guys are late, motherfucker.
We were there in '94, bitches. Like, where were you? You know,
seriously. Where were you when drop zone needed you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Bilge, it's been amazing and a delight as always to have you. Is there anything else you want to tell us about what you're working on and what you've got going on? This will be out in about 2-3 weeks, Liam.
2 weeks, yeah. A little less than 2 weeks.
You know, I'm always at Vulture. You know, I hope so. But that's where you find me. That's where you know, my reviews show up. We'll occasionally write like the booklet essay for a Vinegar Syndrome or Criterion Collection or an Arrow video, which is always fun to do. But primarily Vulture is where you find me.
Wonderful.
Well, we're happy you're there, and we love to read you. So thanks again for doing this. And
thank you.
Well,
Thank you
you'll be back. We hope,
be back.
of course.
Sure. Yes, of course.
I'll be back. Such a bad. Bilge Ebiri, ladies and gentlemen, always. We love that guy.
The man, the myth, the legend. What a delightful human.
Anyway, we could go on and on.
We could go on and on, but we will let you fine folks get out of here. Let's just wrap things up with our thank yous to Tyson for doing all our artwork. Rate, review, subscribe. No one does that though. No one does rate or review. Why don't you actually, instead of us just saying that,
yeah, you know what?
like machines,
stop
actually
saying
do it.
We're gonna stop saying it. You guys are mean to us. Hey, you know,
please help us out,
Phil. I don't know if you know, but we have a Patreon.
We do?
Yeah, it's Patreon. Patreon.
That is brand new information.
And you know what else is brand new is we've never actually said the web address for it, which is patreon.com/48hours of buddy movies. And we have 2 tiers, and one is a $5 tier where you get access to 2 episodes a week. But if you're really special and you give us $7,
2 new ones a month.
2 new ones a month. Excuse me. Thank you. But if you're really special and you give us $7 a month, you get a shout out on this main feed, and that has happened. And so we have to shout out our new subscriber as of this month, Malcolm Sharbit.
That's a joke for the subscribe. That's a purely for a subscription thing.
On the Patreon feed,
sorry, what was the name again?
Malcolm Sharbit.
Malcolm!
Do you know this gentleman?
Malcolm's my friend.
Oh!
Yeah. Oh, I love Malcolm.
Am I saying Malcolm Sharbit? Am I saying that correctly?
I believe so. Okay. I knew him by his originally by his stage name, Malcolm Madeira. He's an absolutely brilliant actor, a brilliant human being, a wonderful guy. He now lives in Montana and is doing great things there in the theater world. He's a dear friend. We've had many wonderful times together, and hopefully we're going to come out and he'll be out in LA and we can watch a baseball game soon. So not everyone will get this kind of treatment if I don't know you, but I will do awkward improv about your name. And we're always grateful for anyone that subscribes to our show. So Malcolm, welcome to the party, pal.
Fantastic, and thank you for going where Captain Vasily Borodin from the Hunt for Red October never made it. That's a really nice stuff. Maybe a little esoteric for the other folks, but I can't help but think of Sam Neill when I think of Montana.
Oh, Montana, yes.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Montana.
I would have liked to have seen Montana. I would have liked to have seen Montana.
It's not too late.
Yeah. Hopefully,
you're doing great.
Get out there.
Yeah.
So yes, next time on 48 Hours of Buddy Movies, it is Midnight Run. Wow. Arguably the best buddy movie of all time. Certainly one of them.
You know, it's a buddy movie I have only seen once about 30-something years ago. I have almost no memory of it.
You are in for a
treat. I rewatched the first 15 minutes earlier this year when it was on Netflix, but then I had to go do something else and I got distracted. And so I'm very excited to revisit that. It's going to be great.
Fantastic. So yes, and can you remind the good folks about the way they can save a few precious pennies?
So here's my tip. Do not subscribe on the Patreon app, but rather do so in a web browser, www.patreon.com/48hours of buddy movies. The reason is that Apple upcharges when you use the app. So what would normally be like a $7 a month fee or a $5 a month fee will be like $8.50 or $10. So we're just trying to save you some money because we don't see that money. That money goes to Apple. If you want to give us more money, I'm fine with that. But just sign up through patreon.com, the web browser. not through the app on your phone.
Thank you, Liam, for explaining that one. Thank you to everyone who is listening to the show right now and for subscribing to our Patreon. It genuinely helps us produce both shows and continue to do the Lord's work of talking about the movies of the golden age of action cinema. And we're heading now into the 2000s, but there's still so many great ones left to come, including the classic, the one we've all been waiting for, the one that the public on X and social media are clamoring for.
Sirs, please cover this film. And it is
Chill Factor.
It's Die Hard in an ice cream truck. When we started this podcast, this lonely street urchin, sir, please cover Chill Factor. Everyone's been waiting for it. Skeet Ulrich, Cuba Gooding Jr., an ice cream truck. This might be an opportunity for us to talk wax poetically about the other great ice cream truck of the 90s, 2000s, the one from Twisted Metal. The video game. Do you remember? Did you ever play Twisted Metal?
I associate it more with Grand Theft Auto, which they use as like for selling drugs, and they all gather around the ice cream truck. This is a
nice little like bisection of our interests. I throw out Twisted Metal, and you're like, no, Grand Theft Auto. That's good. That's good. It's instead of like not Heineken, Pabst Blue Ribbon. It's not Twisted Metal. It's Grand Theft Auto.
Well, we'll be breaking down ice cream vans in popular culture in more detail in that forthcoming episode.
I mean, what else is there to say? We'll be back next time with a fucking ice cream truck. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast from Philip Gothorn and Liam Billingham. Tyson Hubley makes our art. You can hear exclusive episodes of our Patreon show at patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies. Rate, review, subscribe, and tell your action movie-loving friends about the show. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.
Your mom loves to talk on the phone with her friends. If she ate bunches of oats instead of just oats, she wouldn't do it on speakerphone in public. Not only are Honey Bunches of Oats delicious and nutritious, but they'll help keep her from recounting the plot of her steamy romance novel while in the grocery store. Don't just eat oats, eat bunches of oats. Honey Bunches of Oats.
This podcast is brought to you by Aura. By the time you hear about a data breach, your information has already been exposed for months. On average, companies take 277 days to report a breach. That's 9 months where hackers have access to your personal data. That's why we're thrilled to partner with Aura. Aura is an all-in-one digital safety solution that monitors the dark web for your phone number, email, and social security number, sending real-time alerts if your info is found. It also includes a VPN, password manager, and data broker removal to help keep you safe. For a limited time, Aura is offering a 14-day free trial plus a dark web scan to check if your personal information has been leaked, all for free at aura.com/safety. That's aura.com/safety to sign up and protect your loved ones. That's AURA.com/safety. Terms apply. Check the site for details.
Hi guys, it's Phil.
And Liam.
From Die Hard on a Blank. And we're excited to talk to you about a brand new podcast we're launching called 48 Hours of Buddy Movies.
That's right, folks. 48-hour-long
approximately
episodes exploring 48 different buddy movies, beginning with the original classic that started it all, Walter Hill's 1982 masterpiece, 48 Hours, starring Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy.
And just like Die Hard on a Blank, our new show will explore the influence of 48 Hours on the action genre, one buddy movie at a time.
We'll be covering iconic franchises such as the Beverly Hills Cop movies, the Stakeout movies, the Bad Boys movies, classics of the genre like Running Scared,
Hyams Hive Rise Up,
Midnight Run, Red Heat, Tango and Cash, The Hard Way,
plus tough thrillers such as To Live and Die in LA, Black Rain, Point Break, Training Day, and The Way of the Gun.
As well as a few wild cards that you might not expect, such as RoboCop, Alien Nation, and, of course, Phil's favorite,
Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
So if you're a fan of two buddies talking buddy movies,
then 48 Hours of Buddy Movies is for you.
Visit patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe for the price of 1 cup of coffee a month.
See you in the squad car.
Or walking to the squad car, mildly irritated that we've been paired off.
Wherever. That's patreon.com/48 hours of body movies to subscribe.